Hey. Good morning. Center for Spiritual Living, Palm Desert, and friends all over the world. So grateful to have you with us this morning. Tuesday, the culminating week for our exploration through the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. I'm Ibram Kendi, and it's been a wonderful ride. My partner in study and exploration and transformation, Jeffon Seely, will be joining us here momentarily. And so grateful to be with all of you again on another Tuesday. It's 18 weeks. What is that? 4.5 months that we've been exploring this book, going chapter by chapter, unpacking the information in here and working on transforming, working on changing ourselves, working on becoming a better person. You know, just what does better mean? It means more reconciled, I guess, is what it means for, as far as this book is concerned, more anti-racist, more equitable, welcoming. And I love some of the information he gets into in this chapter. And I know Jeffon, when he pops on, he's got some slides he's going to share with us and lead us through the dialogue and the discourse today. But there's some really good points to bring this book home, and I'm grateful for it. So how are you this morning? Let us know you're out there. Of course, as always, we love to hear from you. Where are you? What insights have you had from the book? How has it been for you, this journey? Today would be an awesome day to hear from everybody about one insight, maybe a change you've made, a new thought you've had. We are in the new thought movement. Have you had a new thought, a new idea? Have you been activated in some way? Have you been changed in some way? After this conversation this week, we're going to move on Tuesdays for the next couple of months. We're going to be having some other staff members here from the center sharing some workshops and various things. So this is the last week. We'll have this particular conversation about racism, anti-racism, race relations, those types of things. We'll still, of course, always be talking about principle on Tuesdays. We're just going to change the direction a little bit and start going down a different path for the next couple of months as we move through the holidays. But always at the forefront, I think what's important is that we keep the conversation relevant. We keep it prevalent. We keep it on the forefront. We keep it going in our own communities, in our own circles, even though we won't be doing it on this particular platform over the next number of months. It's important in our own communities that we keep having the conversation. We keep challenging ourselves. We keep having the conversation with ourselves. We keep having the conversation with each other in order to challenge each other, in order to keep becoming, in order to keep growing. I certainly know as we've been moving through this book that I've had ideas challenged and have been welcomed into new ideas. I've had paradigms, knocking at the door of paradigms saying, really, is this really how you want to live? And I think that's the important part about transformation. The important part about being willing to change is that we stay in the game. You all know I'm a sports guy, and even when you're down, you got to keep believing that there's a possibility, and that's where we are. We keep believing in the possibility, keep believing in the as I shared on my Life on Love on last Friday, one of Ernest Holmes' statements. We believe the ultimate goal of life to be the complete emancipation of all discord of every nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by all, but we have to stay in the game in order for that to happen. We have to keep challenging ourselves. And as Kendi talks about, the author talks about here in this chapter, the change he really has come to, that it's about policy change, that we're talking about a change in policy, a change in not just our thinking, but how our thinking is informed. What informs our thinking? Where do your ideas come from? And oftentimes ideas and thinking comes from structure. You know, the policy that exists in my daughter's school informs her thinking. And so we're very mindful of what school our daughter attends so that she can be informed by the most life-giving structures, the policies that exist within those structures. How did those structures come to be? And the author's really inviting us powerfully into that idea of we have to address the structures and the policy that exists in our country, not just the way we think, because we can inform the way we think if we rewrite the laws, if we change the way things are done. And that's real activism. And he goes through a number of points here. Jeffon, are you there? Are you going to jump in here? Are you with us yet? Not quite yet. He goes on page 231 and 232, goes through a number of teams, I think he calls them, to address steps we can all take to eliminate racial inequity in our spaces. And I'm just going to go through them right now and share them with you. These are probably in Jeffon's slides as well, but he's not here, so I'm going to rock and roll. Admit racial inequity is a problem of bad policy, not bad people. What that also invites us into is compassion. Bad policy informs thinking, informs behavior. Structure informs people and informs behavior. And we know based in principle, there are no bad people. There's simply things that we've been informed by that cause our behavior, that cause our actions. Admit racial inequity is a problem of bad policy, not bad people. Identify racial inequity in all its intersections and manifestations. And if we're still curious about what that is, we can go back through the book, reread it, and he addresses those throughout the book. The second one, investigate and uncover the racist policies causing racial inequity. Investigate and uncover. How do we investigate? Well, it's easier to investigate now than it's ever been. You investigate through the internet. You know, you don't have to have a collection of Encyclopedia Britannicas anymore. But also, we investigate not only through the internet, but what's more powerful is investigating through conversation, through dialogue with individuals. Investigate and uncover the racist policies causing racial inequity. What conversations have you had with people that don't necessarily share your same viewpoint? That's an easy conversation to have. Someone that shares my views. Someone that shares how I see things. There he is. That's Jeffon Seely. You're here, brother. I was going through probably some things that are definitely some things that are definitely some things that are on your slide. So I'm going to stop right there. Welcome you into the conversation. Say good morning, my brother. How are you? And then turn this over to you to guide the conversation. How are you, brother? Welcome.
I'm doing.
You said you might be 2 minutes in. This is almost 10. What's going on?
Well, yeah, right. I was thinking the whole time. I'm like, okay. And I had a really good conversation today with an organization in Maryland about this whole concept of creating a culture of equality by recognizing our inherent worth within ourselves and the inherent worth within everybody else. And so, it went a little longer than anticipated, but it was great, and I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you.
That's a worthy conversation to have.
It's a powerful conversation.
That's a powerful conversation. You know, if I couldn't give you the business for 10 seconds, then We're not buddies. By the way, we've come into perfect golf weather here in the Valley.
Yeah, we
and in San Bernardino and everywhere else. So welcome, my friend. Are you doing well this morning? You've already been working hard, huh? You've been sharing with folks and across the country. Love it.
Doing great. Doing
cool.
really well. Doing really well.
All right. Well, I've just been rapping about some things. Do you want to what I did, and I just left off on the second point on page 231 and 232, going through some of the ways that the author invites us into steps we can take to eliminate racial inequity. But why don't you start leading the conversation, and I'll just I'll come along for the ride, and let's see where you're starting with your PowerPoints, more with your slides.
Definitely. And
all right.
I have to say, this has been such an incredible expression with Palm Desert, CSL Palm Desert, and with you, Rev Charles, and Dr. Joe, and Rev Lori, and Jeff Harrison, all of you for providing me with this chance to just be a part of your community in this way has been beautiful. So thank you all.
Yeah, and I just want to let you know too, I shared that at the top of the show, just that's 18 weeks, that's 4.5 months that we've been diving through this book and having this conversation, and that we're going to be switching gears a little bit over the next couple of weeks, couple of months. But how grateful I am to have been walking this journey with you, and the importance that we keep the conversation going, even though we don't it's not formalized in this particular way, but in our own communities and our own circles, that we keep having the challenging conversations that cause transformation, that cause us to grow, that welcome us into a new paradigm.
Yeah. Totally agree. I totally agree. So if I covered some of the things, or if I'm going to cover some of the things that you said, please.
Just rock and roll. Just rock and roll, brother.
Fantastic. So on page, let's see what page this is, 231, I believe. He was saying, because he's went through this journey of being an educator, and he recognized, and everybody who's chiming in or has tuned in, many blessings to you as well. He was saying that he tried to educate away his racist ideas, seeing ignorance as the source of racist ideas, seeing racist ideas as the source of racist policies, and seeing mental change as the principal solution. He saw it for himself, an educator, or he's ultimately said he was a problem solver. But he said the source of racist ideas was not ignorance and hate, but self-interest, which he then said, racist ideas is the history of powerful policymakers. Remember, we talked about that in the past few chapters, erecting racist policies out of self-interest, and then producing racist ideas to defend and rationalize the inequitable effects of their policies, while everyday people consume racist ideas, which in turn sparks ignorance and hate. So he's ultimately saying that we cannot just treat ignorance and hate and expect racism to shrink, which I thought was a powerful, powerful point. Getting at the heart of the matter, or what is the root cause, the causal nature, which are those policies that are perpetuating certain ideas that reinforce the inequity that we're trying to resolve.
Yes, and that's, I said that before you came on as well, Jeffon, that we have to look to what's informing our thinking. What structures inform how we view the world, which is policy and structure. And it really is a powerful point that he came to. Yep.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that's, page 230. So he had this incredible, this chapter with this whole concept of cancer in his family, with himself, and how he kind of compared it to racism. And again, racist policies lead to racist ideas.
Yeah.
So, and with the cancer idea, or conversation, his wife had breast cancer, his mother had cancer, his father had cancer, and then at the tail end of the chapter, he ended up getting stage 4 colon cancer and actually survived, which I'll bring some comparisons as we move on. But he ultimately started saying, Rev Charles, having the conversation is great, trying to be this problem solver or educator, but what am I actually doing to change policy? And that is something that I would like you and Palm Desert community, Center for Spiritual Living Palm Desert community, to hold me accountable for. Jeffon, you talk a lot about this stuff, but where are you actually making these changes? And that's something that I know I can work on. And how can I genuinely urge people to focus on changing policy if I'm not focused on changing policy?
Yep.
And that's something that all of us can do. We don't have to go at some national level and reach the, judicial system in DC to make this massive change. We can start right where we are.
That's where it is. That's where it is, Jeffon. That's what I was saying. Ask for a meeting with your mayor or your local policymakers. Ask for a meeting.
Yeah.
And that's I love that the author talked about, he's out there educating, but he noticed even in the midst of that, there was hypocrisy. That he's not doing anything to actually change policy. He's just talking about it.
Yeah.
So that was my call. That's what I keep coming back to. And I think maybe we had that conversation a couple of weeks ago. You can get a meeting with your local assemblyman, assemblywoman, with your local city council to have these types of conversations, city council members. That's where policy, and it's not to become political, it's to be a human being.
Right. And we can organize individuals behind a common idea or principle that leads to equity and bring that to the forefront. I mean, we do that at Center for Spiritual Living all the time. It's a group of like-minded people who stand behind principle, ideas that are discussed that resonate as true for ourselves. And we take that forth and impact our organizations, our households, the community itself. But imagine if we continue moving it forward and powerfully or profoundly impact the policies that we are seeing for people who may not necessarily, like a younger me, when I didn't know that there was even a Center for Spiritual Living out there. So nevertheless, I think.
Love it.
So we had to start researching and educating to change policy. He then called himself, I'm a public scholarship. And on the bottom of page 231, which you probably touched upon, he started mentioning some of that. And on the bottom of page 231.
Yeah, he said the former strategy produces a public scholar. The latter produces public scholarship, which I think is that was good.
That was great. That was really. Yeah. So what are we doing, Rev Charles? I mean, what can we do? Is there something that pops into your mind that we can do to begin this process? Or I know local leaders and things of that sort, but is there anything that is at the forefront of your mind that you're thinking this is something that we could really stand behind?
Well, I think what I just said is I think one of the ways that if we're talking about changing policy, well, I think what we're about first and foremost at Centers for Spiritual Living is a new thought. We're part of the new thought movement, which is to have a new thought, change your paradigm. As he's addressed a number of times in the book, be willing to challenge yourself and change. And then from that change, live into a new paradigm, a new way of thinking and being, get comfortable with it, and then act upon it. And that's when it comes to meeting with your local legislators. And as high as you want to go. I mean, I remember one time we were doing a project when I was at my former center that I founded up in Seattle, and we got on the phone calling the White House. We tried to get in touch with President Obama, and we ultimately didn't get through. But we called the operator, and we were literally on hold for an hour and a half. And we're thinking, well, if we're on hold for this long, maybe we're going to get through. Anyway. It's probably not going to be as difficult. We ultimately didn't, but I think it's to have the gumption in order to have a vision for the world we want to live in, to have a vision for the world that I want my daughter to live into, that I want to live into. And then we don't have to become a zealot, but to take some sort of action on behalf of that. And I think if we're talking about rewriting policy and law, then we have to be willing to knock on the door of our legislators and say, hey, this is what's important. And be able to have an adult, life-giving, persuasive conversation talking about that.
Yeah. And it's fascinating if we encompass or circle in affirmative prayer to that idea of, recognizing the one power, unifying with that power, recognizing that we are led and guided, realizing that it is already done and it is put forth in motion, expressing gratitude around that, and then releasing, and then treating and moving our feet. So treat and then move our feet. That's with right. That type of ideation behind it or power behind it. I mean, there is so much that any one human can accomplish, but when we come together in these unique ways, I mean, there is no limit. It's infinite.
And that affirmative prayer, it gets us right, gets us aligned, it gets our mind right, gets our heart right, gets us, it gets us aligned with power, with real power, true power, anchored power, power, baby.
So on the bottom of 231 to 232, there is an italicized, many italicized lines that I'm not going to read through right now, but I would encourage everybody to check it, to look at those if you have the book, because there's
about to read through each one of them. Actually,
please.
When you came on, that's what I was doing. I was going through each one of them.
I knew it. I knew one of us was going to do that.
Yeah. Do you want to go there? I mean, how many more slides do you have? But I think it's important.
Please, Rev Charles, let's do it.
So let's go one at a time, back and forth.
Let's do it.
Admit racial inequity is a problem of bad policy, not bad people. Identify racial inequity in all its intersections and manifestations, not bad policy or bad policy, not bad people.
Yes.
And as I shared a little bit earlier, that goes back to principle that none of us exist outside of the one spirit and love of God, of the presence. How we've been informed by policy and by structure affects how we think, how we live. So if we adjust policy and structure, we're actually going to change people by doing that. So, and that it's a circle. It's a cycle. We see that. It's a cycle. Change my mind. So I don't think it's as black and white as don't address ignorance and things like that. I think it's just all part of the same pie.
Yeah.
Change our mind through affirmative prayer and through being exposed to new ideas, and then go act on behalf of that to change policy and structure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a point that has been said again and again through this book. It's not bad people, it's bad policy.
Yep.
So at the top of 232, I'll read two of them here.
Yeah.
Investigate and uncover the racist policies causing racial inequity. We talked about that last weekend. Last Tuesday, last week. Invent or find anti-racist policy that can eliminate racial inequity. Again, coming back to those policies that are producing racist ideas that continue to perpetuate racial inequity.
Yep. And investigating, again, I shared a little bit about this. Investigating, you can investigate through the internet, but I think, and he addresses that in here, powerful investigation also includes having conversations wherever we find ourselves with people that share the same ideas and with people that don't share the same ideas.
Yeah.
We start to uncover things because he talks about this book is based on his collection of racist ideas. Yeah. How he talks about collecting them. I think at the very beginning of the chapter he said, and something like that. Anyway.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
he did. Figure out who or what group has the power to institute anti-racist policy, and then disseminate and educate about uncovering racist policy and anti-racist policy correctives. I mean, this is like a step-by-step how to do it.
Yeah.
Work with sympathetic anti-racist policymakers to institute anti-racist policy. I think that brings back the conversation we had last week about the importance of voting and realizing the people who you are voting for and asking the ways in which they support anti-racist and or racist policies. Not saying that they're racist people, but saying that do they support these policies that continue to reinforce these ideas that are leading to this inequity?
Yes. Yes.
Extremely important. And sometimes you have to read between the lines there.
Deploy anti-racist power to compel or drive from power the unsympathetic racist policymakers in order to institute the anti-racist policy. So he's really just talking about activism. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just acting. Do something.
Yeah. Yeah. And then monitor closely to ensure anti-racist policy reduces and eliminates racial inequity. Which means it's not enough just to have these ideas or intentions, but to follow it through to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing where it might come short, and or if it creates another chasm or another set of circumstances that may be towards a different group of individuals.
Mm-hmm. When policies fail, do not blame the people. Start over and seek out new and more effective anti-racist treatments until they work. As much as, I love his self-disclosure through the course of the book, and he talks about, his own hypocrisy and willingness to grow and learn. And it comes, there's a tremendous amount of compassion that I started seeing through the course of this from the author, that it's so easy we get so angry with each other, even on the road, driving. That idiot can't drive. I'm so mad, just slowing down in front, it's okay. Well, where did they learn how to drive? How did they learn how to drive? And why am I so upset about it?
Right.
I love the idea from from Michael Beckwith from many years ago. I remember a sermon, he talked about being unbotherable, wherever that idea comes from. You're the one being bothered. Why? Why are you bothered? So anyway, it's not, again, it just keeps coming back to structure and policy. That's what he's talking about. And that there is something, there's still something about, the waking up from ignorance and my willingness to do that. And not that it's my responsibility necessarily to wake other people up from ignorance, but that at least I can enter into a conversation where it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Either way.
Yeah. And having that level of courageousness to venture into those inner caverns within yourself that may be very uncomfortable in nature, to begin to expose and step beyond that proverbial cliff that we think stops the known from the unknown.
Yep.
And then at the end, he says here, or I think the last line there, monitor closely to prevent new racist policies from being instituted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's like you said, like a circle. And we're going to continue to expand as humanity continues to evolve in consciousness. We will come up with new ways to do things that otherwise seem outdated or very familiar. And we have to give ourselves this idea or this grace period to begin to expand beyond what we believe to be as absolute truth and embrace that uncomfortable feeling that is often involved when we are expanding and growing.
Yep. And to not just take the author's word for it, but to do our own. Again, that's one of the first things he talks about is investigate.
Yeah.
Do our own work, our own research. How do we meet the world? Not just drink the Kool-Aid because somebody's got a book and a book makes it, you an authority. You're your own authority. And we work on bringing in new ideas and challenging ourselves through new ideas. But, just because he italicized these things, don't make them ultimate truth. It's a guidepost for us to investigate our own life.
I think that's a point that I know reading a lot of books, and sometimes I've actually had to practice consciously not accepting what I'm reading as absolute truth, but being willing to explore the ideas and see how it aligns with me. And for a long time, I would read books and like, okay, well, I got to implement this. I got to do this. I got to do this. And some of those things did not align with what was happening internally within myself. And so it is with this book as well. Like you said, it's not absolute truth. This is the way that it is done. This can open a doorway for us to begin to explore what works for us and how we can approach these type of conversations.
That's right. Love it.
Critical,
all right, my brother.
Okay.
We dove down that rabbit hole. I'm sure we got much more. Let's go.
Thank you for having us go through those. That was actually really, really important.
Yeah.
So moving along here. Okay, so let me give a little bit of leading into this. So he was really beginning to approach this conversation of policy preceding racist ideas. And in the process, he started recognizing he was losing weight and not feeling good and throwing up and all of these things. And ultimately, as I said in the beginning, began to recognize that he had colon cancer. After his wife had went into remission for her cancer, his mother as well, he found out he had this level of colon cancer, to which only 12% of people survive. And in this kind of conversation that he was having with himself, he began to recognize the similarities between cancer and racism, cancer in the body and racism in society. And what he ultimately came to this conclusion of was that our world is suffering from metastatic cancer, stage 4, he says. And racism has spread to nearly every part of the body in society when we think of it. He says it's intersecting with bigotry of all kinds, on the bottom of page 234, justifying all kinds of inequities by victim blaming, heightening exploitation and misplaced hate, spurring mass shootings, arms races, demagogues who polarize nations, all of these particular things. And I thought that this was an incredible comparison. And how many people, he said, stare inside the body of their nations? Let me say that again. How many people stare inside the body of their nation's racial inequities, their neighborhoods' racial inequities, their occupations' racial inequities, their institutions' racial inequities, and flatly deny that the policies within them are racist? And he's saying it from a perspective of looking into the body when you have some type of dis-ease,
Yep.
in recognizing, okay, it is metastasizing, it is growing, it is spreading, looking in the body, how can I rid my body of this? Or how can I eliminate this from my body? In the same way with racism in society, how can we look at the body that we are in, nations, neighborhoods, communities, businesses, and start recognizing this spreading of this seeming dis-ease of racism, which perpetually creates these inequities, oppresses, and deems individual as inferior. I thought that was an incredible point.
I agree. And I think it has a lot to do with denial out of fear. If I actually acknowledge cancer or the cancer of racism, there's a long journey. If I acknowledge disease, there's a long journey I'm probably going to have to go through in order to get healed from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a long journey that we need to walk through with some heavy lifting in order to heal ourselves of these racist ideas. But acknowledgement, we have to acknowledge first that it's there, and then at least we can plot out a course and a path of how to heal.
And if you ask me, those of us who are in New Thought teachings or Center for Spiritual Living, Science of Mind, who better to approach this than individuals who have embraced the concept of principle and in our ability to think consciously and create a new thought and align with infinite intelligence? I mean, who better to stand up and move forward and shift things in such a way, because we know internally that is possible, that is principle, that is the foundation that we stand upon. I mean, who better, who else than us?
I don't have an answer for that. We are it. We're the ones we've been waiting for, as the saying often goes.
Absolutely.
And
so,
all of us too. You know, it's certainly us, and you know, affirmation and positivity has influence. It influences people.
yeah. And to that point there of our sometimes flatly denying that policies are racist. The popular conception of denial, like the popular strategy of suasion, which we heard in, I believe, chapter 16, suicidal in nature. It simply is not going to move the needle whatsoever. Denying actually is almost pouring gasoline on it. And just because it's not in your field of awareness does not mean that it is not out there impacting people in a detrimental way.
Yep.
Which I think we've talked about a handful of times, haven't we?
It's there.
So I thought this point on page 235 was probably, from my perspective, one of the most important concepts from this chapter. And the author said he had survived cancer because he went through it. He was one of the 12% who survived. He survived cancer, the most serious stage. Cancer was likely to kill him, but he can survive cancer at all odds. Our society has racism, the most serious stage. Racism is likely to kill our society, but our society can survive racism at all odds. And I thought that was a powerful point there.
Most definitely.
Extremely.
But we gotta be willing to buckle up. You know, he's, and then the next line is, I prepared myself to fight. So you can insert another word for fight in there, but it's time to stand up and find some courage and some backbone. And obviously that's what he did in order to heal himself from cancer, and what we need to do in order to heal ourselves. There's some questions coming in all of a sudden.
So Eager Guest says, from the website, I'm thinking that calling it a racist policy is problematic. Why not call it a bad policy?
Well, if it's racist, it's racist.
And when we're talking about a racist policy, we're talking about the way that it creates racial inequity.
And we're talking about the color of people's skin. Right. Or, you know, which is one aspect of what we're looking at. It's both. It's bad policy too.
And it's a bad policy. Yeah. But I mean, we're talking about racial inequity and racial inequality or inequity throughout this conversation, throughout this book. And he's really beginning to highlight, and he's really tried to do a great job at marrying racist policy and racist ideas fuel racial inequity, which was his definition of racism. So that's the reason why we're calling it, at least in this conversation right now that Charles and I are having, as racist policy. Because we're trying to pinpoint those to begin to implement anti-racist policy, hence the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist.
Yep.
Anti-racist policy to create racial equity.
Yep. And you know, let's call a spade a spade. Again, it comes back to acknowledgement. It doesn't mean it's truth. It means we see it, though.
Yeah.
You know, it whether your skin's white, black, brown, you know, the ultimate truth is that we come from the same source. That's principle. And the expression of it is how our body shows up. And he makes a point of even talking about the black body, you know, the white body. Yeah. And how just even on that superficial level, I'll call it superficial, but it goes so deep, it informs us and the policies that we create. So it's both racist and bad. If we want to use the word bad, it's just it's not equitable.
Right. Yep. Right. And this point too, if we look past what could harm us as we are engaging in the shift, the expansion of consciousness, the fight, so to say, to see all the joy that is there when we survive. And it's almost this expectation that I've learned from CSL and New Thought is this idea of knowing. and entering into, in the apparent absence of the thing that we envision, it is there in the infinite realm of possibility, and an inward sense of knowing as we move through the seeming struggle or expansion of consciousness to be able to obtain that equal and just world. I mean, we can all hold that in the forefront of our mind and then do the work knowing that it is done.
Have a vision that pulls us forward.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And what are the steps we need to do in consciousness and in action in order to bring about the joy when we survive? Absolutely. Love it.
And that was there on page 235.
Mm-hmm.
Following along in the book. So this jumps to the next page. And when it comes to healing America of racism, we want to heal America without pain. But often we recognize that without pain, there is often no progress. And the analogy of the seed expanding is something that it comes to the forefront of my mind. Pushing outside of the shell, reaching towards the light, entering into this environment that is totally different than the comfort of the seed itself, but willing to continue to expand. Let's see, we have another comment here. Can make the case for racist policy, and if someone can make a case it is not racist, there is a problem. Bad policies are bad policies. I think calling it racist is not helping. I respect their viewpoint. But for the scope of this book, I would just say that it's centered around racism and anti-racism.
Yeah.
So
I respect that as well. I don't have a whole lot to say about that, but yeah, we're looking at the idea of how and where racism exists and why. So and I love it.
Yeah.
I'm
And for the scope of this conversation, it is out there. We can survive this. We will survive this. And we as humanity, I have faith that we will be able to find a way to have these difficult conversations and move forward and eliminate this from our realm of being. And there's a paragraph on page 238 that really begins to highlight that. That I would encourage. It's a long paragraph, Rev Charles. I don't know if I'm going to go through that.
No? All right. We've got a little bit of time if you want to read it.
Okay. Let's do it. So 238. So what if we connected the treatment plans that are done when somebody has cancer in the body? What if we had a treatment plan like that for society to heal itself of racism? So kind of the conversation. I'm just kind of setting the stage.
Yep.
So if we saturate the body with chemotherapy or immune type therapy of anti-racist policies that shrink the tumors of racial inequities, that kill undetectable cancer cells, which is the racism, remove any remaining racist policies the way surgeons remove tumors, ensure there are clear margins, meaning no cancer cells of inequity left in the body, only healthy cells of equity. Encourage the consumption of healthy food for thought and the regular exercising of anti-racist ideas to reduce the likelihood of a reoccurrence. Monitor the body closely, especially where the tumors of racial inequity previously existed. Detect and treat a reoccurrence early before it can grow and threaten the rest of the body. I mean, that was an incredible play of metaphors there.
Mm-hmm. It's good. I'm what idea am I left with that? Well, I'm not too sure, but there, what the author keeps pointing at is a system, though, a system of acknowledging this, exploring it, and working on healing it. That's what I really enjoy about this. That, you know, like, let's go about it systematically, though. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Science and doctors have come to, okay, if we identify cancer, you know, these are the ways we could go about addressing it. And I appreciate that. I guess one of the questions I'm left with when it comes to something like chemotherapy, it kills everything.
It does.
It doesn't differentiate between the bad cells and the good cells.
Right.
You know, it goes into, and I know there's, and I'm not an authority on this, but I've been around enough people and processes to know that it's not a clean treatment. It kills the body.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we get specific enough to address what's not working? That, I guess that's the other road here when it comes to his analogy is, how do we get specific enough to address what's not working without killing what is working?
Yeah, and I think that's where the metaphor can only take us so far.
Yeah.
And that's where we as humans have the ability to use our consciousness, our level of reasoning to recognize and intuitively know the areas where we are not creating a world, a community, a nation that works for everybody. And I would think that we as humanity, though it seems we're on all different sides of the spectrum, if we were willing to really ask what is the greatest good of all people, we would be able to identify the things that are promoting that equity and the things that are not.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's not a systematic process. It's not a process that can just be waved with a wand and suddenly it's done. I mean, really, it's addressing almost these policies one by one and having an in-depth analysis around it, and then working to replace it with something that is more equitable in nature.
Yep.
And that is that's a process.
Because there are things, you know, we're looking at in how to become an anti-racist through this book. We're looking at racist, but there are so many things that are working in our world as well.
Quite a lot.
As we in this our culminating week, which I believe is important to address as well. We look at so many things that aren't working.
Yep.
In the process of, you know, acknowledging this book and walking through it. A lot of things are working.
A lot of incredible things are working. And the good of humanity, or the good of the human heart, is there. It's within everybody from my perspective. And that is something that we see showing up all the time in our communities, in our neighborhoods, around the nation. We see a lot of acts of incredible compassion and peace and love, and ideas that don't even pop racism or anti-racism in the mind. It's just harmony.
Yeah.
And that is there. And you're right, Rev Charles, because we've talked for 18 weeks now about this book, and this book has kind of directed our conversation to some level of degree.
Yeah.
But I think that it is an important point for us to remind one another, and obviously everybody who is chiming in, that there is a lot of good, an incredible amount of good.
Yep.
And from the divine aspect, an infinite amount of good.
That's right.
It is forever unfolding.
That's right. And we will find what we're looking for. And so as we're, you know, this might go back to, you know, eager guess, racist policy versus bad policy. And, I get that point. And you find what you're looking for. So there's an acknowledgement that racism does exist and that racist policy does exist. I'll call it bad as well. And as we begin to continue to inform ourselves in a new way, to be welcomed into new thoughts and the new ideas that are more life-giving, more equitable, we start to see more of what's working. We start to see more equity, a greater equity. We start to see what's possible, and in that seeing is championing it as well. So that when there is a recognition of what's not working, we step in and say, whoa, this needs to change, because what I'm committed to seeing is a world that works for all.
Yes, that is a powerful point. And another point that my mentor, I sent him this book just to get some of his thoughts. He said, the first thing he said after he read it is, "Do you know Louise Hay?" And I told him, "Yeah." And he said, "Her book, You Can Heal Your Life, I believe it is."
Mm.
And I'm like, "Yeah." And he said, the author seemed to be harboring a good amount of anger. And if you look in that book of Louise Hay, harboring anger often produces some type of disease in the body. And he said, I mean, that's how it ended.
Yep.
And that was a point that I also want to kind of just share, is being mindful of these. We can have these conversations, but we do not need to harbor animosity or anger or hatred towards anybody or anything. We can bring in a sense of empowerment, a sense of peace, a sense of well-being, a sense of knowing, that is seemingly directly opposite of those that I just mentioned. And that is something that I know that I have been really making a point to practice in my life, where even if there is something that is very upsetting happening in the world, how can I approach it from an empowered space instead of this space of either victimhood or anger or even a level of hatred? How can I bring this a more empowered and seemingly conscious space to move forward and perhaps do the work that being angry probably wouldn't afford?
Absolutely. And it makes us see it has us see things differently.
Yeah.
When our world is colored by anger or yeah. So I appreciate this aspect of the conversation as well. And perhaps the author is angry, and there are a lot of, black and brown folks in the world that are angry, rightfully so. And
Yeah.
I again appreciate what the author keeps coming back to, is that we have personal responsibility, bring it back down to the individual and not mass groups or even race groups. What can I individually do? And from a principle standpoint, I have control over my own mind.
Right.
I have control over my own heart, and there's very little else that I have control over. So
Yeah.
what can I do? What can I be up to in order to see more regularly, more often, the good that's happening, and where there is injustice, act and feel empowered to act.
And to that point, I have entered onto this earth, with an inherent worth within me. It is my birthright. It is not at the mercy of what is happening out there. So as a brown person, biracial individual, I have an inherent worth regardless of what is happening out there. And that is something from a human level all of us can tap into. There is an inherent worth that is available to all of us to tap into. And the level of degree to which we tap into it internally, it seems to be that is the level to which we then recognize it in all. Because how can I say that I honor, cherish, and recognize my inherent worth if I am not actually supporting the inherent worth of the people that is all around me or that I find myself around? And that is the point that I think is maybe the most important. And it might be because that's what I was doing my conversation prior to this,
right,
about that this idea of equality, and equality not in sense of you have the same even playing field as everybody else, but a sense of equality in terms of an inherent worth that you've come into this earth possessing, that is a birthright that cannot be given to you by way of somebody patting you on the back and saying you belong here, that cannot be given to you because of how much money you make, that cannot be given to you because of some piece of paper that somebody wrote in many states away and said, now you're equal. It is something that we can claim for us any moment because it is inherently a part of who and what we are.
Yep. And that informs then how we live.
Completely.
Love it.
How we choose, how we act, our emotions, all of those things.
Yep. All of it.
Yeah. So
that's a good work to be up to. We're getting close to the top of the hour, my brother. Do we have Jeffon's takeaways this week?
Yeah, let's do a few takeaways and then
Jeffon's takeaways.
Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this is the 18 weeks strong. I want to leave you with a few good ones. Probably the most important one is what I just mentioned, the inherent worth that is within you. But to piggyback many of the ideas that we discussed on throughout this book, here's a few that maybe you can carry with you. What is one anti-racist policy that you can organize around and also create within your community? So how can we put our feet on the ground and do the work? One policy. Have a conversation with people at CSL Palm Desert or wherever you find yourself and ask, what is something that we can impact or can continuously impact in our community beyond the impact that you all already make? Okay. Number 2, dedicate yourself to eliminating racist ideas within you. Catch yourself when they pop up. And don't feel ashamed. Don't feel guilty. Catch it and redirect. Open up a new thought. Shift your mind. Course correct, so to say. And just be mindful of that. Meditate and reflect daily on the ways that you can use your energy, which is infinite in nature, to create a more equal and equitable world. To align with affirmative prayer, trust the divine guidance that you are provided in those moments of stillness. They lead the way. It leads the way. It is always there. We can always be guided. And this one has been with us for many weeks. The devoted followers know this. Ask yourself each night, what ways did I act anti-racist and what ways did I not? And just come back to that and maybe have a journal and write that down. And then an imperative, an important idea is please don't stop here. Let's continue forward with the same way that we read Science of Mind, the same way that we go through our courses to become practitioners or just to learn. What really happens in the most important aspect is what we do with it in the world or in our daily living. It's not what we can, the passages that we can recite in front of people. It's the way that we live our lives. So let this be a stepping stone on this journey that we are all walking together. And let's continue forward in a way that is in unity, with love and compassion. And I just say from the depths of my heart, thank you, Rev Charles, Dr. Joe, everybody there at CSL Palm Desert, and everybody who has listened over the course of these last few months for just being a part of this. I mean, it truly has fed me spiritually, and I've looked forward to it every single week. And I just have nothing but love for all of you. And Rev Charles, it's been incredible to get to know you like this, because now you're a lifelong friend, whether you want to be or not. You're stuck.
I don't have a say in the matter. That's the way it is. Eager guest, thank you, and you're welcome. It's been a wonderful journey. Even before we started this book, I mean, Jeffon and I, you and I have been on every week for, I don't know, 5-6 months now, huh?
Since May. Since
May, yeah. It's been a wonderful journey. I appreciate you. I just want to hype on that last point too. We need to keep having the conversations. Let's not make it overly laborious. There is some labor involved in it. But we just want to keep having the conversation. We want to keep things at the forefront so we can continue to become a better human being, a better expression of ourselves. I'm so grateful to you, Jeffon, for your willingness to be on here every Tuesday. As I mentioned, we're a little bit earlier. We're pivoting now. We're going to go into some different things. Jeffon and I won't be on for the next few months. We'll see what the 2021 brings and how we're going to keep working together. I think when we're out on the golf course one day, we'll concoct a new plan and come up with something.
Well, I'm searching in the trees for my ball because of that heavy right slide.
Well, maybe we can cure that too. But it's been a wonderful number of months to be with you and walk this journey out. And I echo Jeffon. Thank you all who have who've trooped it out with us.
Yes.
Through the course of 4.5 months, 18 weeks, and been part of the conversation. I know that Jeffon and I both pray and hope and know that it's been beneficial for you, as it has been for both of us. Yes. And what a wonderful journey it's been. So I'm grateful to you as well, Jeffon. Thank you so much. And all of our community. So we're wrapping it up next Tuesday. at this same time, Reverend Bradley Wentker, one of our new staff ministers here, along with Dr. Michelle Madrano from Mile High Center, will be presenting From COVID to Christmas, which is a compelling idea. And you can find the information about that on our website. So that's next Tuesday. We continue, as always, to welcome and be blessed by your financial contributions to our center as we continue to march on with our daily programming, with our classes in the evenings, with our intention circles, social circles, Sunday services, all of the ways that we're committed to sharing with you principle and good and keeping our ideas aloft, lifted, so that we can continue to be about the work of the kingdom of heaven and queendom of heaven here and now. Not sometime down the road, but now. And that includes what we've been addressing the last number of months, and a steady exploration of principles. So we appreciate you. You see there, Reverend Lori, thank you so much for producing so many of these shows on Tuesdays, and the wonderful talent and gift that you bring. You can see there that Lori put up. One of the ways you can support the center is through texting your gift. The phone number is there. You can go on the website and do it electronically. Almost everything's electronic nowadays, isn't it, Jeffon? I mean, what is this thing called cash anymore?
Decimals transferred in a computer system.
That's right. So call the center, mail, email, text, website. We continue to appreciate your support. Thanks for being with us on the journey. Jeffon, much love, my brother.
Thank you, Rev Charles. I appreciate it. We'll be in touch.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Have a magnificent day, all. And remember to make today, what? Best day ever. Peace and love.
Goodbye.